2 days ago, we woke up to a video that's gone viral and everybody was sending to everybody. In fact, I saw at least 20 of the same video sent to me from different parts, some of them from overseas. What was it? Agbakoba addressing a press conference in which he was talking about the constitution that has to be addressed in one form or the other, and talking about the candidates that have to now be brought to tell us how they were going to engage with it. Ordinarily, as most of the people who were sending that video were thinking, that yes, this question of the constitution that has to be addressed. Oh, have you spoken to Olisa? Is he aware of what is being proposed? This broadcast is to redirect Olisa Agbakoba, senior advocate of Nigeria, on the subject of his propositions, because he was then talking about devolution of power. He was talking about candidates to be engaged. He was talking about, all kinds of mechanisms by which people in the National Assembly or the president, when he emerges, will then lead, because it will then be between the president and the National Assembly. I do not know where to draw the line between ignorance and dishonesty in this matter, because my senior, Olisa Agbakoba, senior advocate, had been involved in this discussion long time enough to understand that the business of constitution making is not for the National Assembly, it's not for the president. It is exclusively, and we're speaking jurisprudence here now, except he learned his own jurisprudence from somewhere else. The jurisprudence I was taught, and which I've had cause to disagree with Professor Ben Wabweze at the time he was preaching the same heresy, that it is the government that will have to work out what will become constitution. For a federation like Nigeria, Professor Ben Wabweze did boast that that was how they did it in 1976-77, that became the 1979 constitution. At the time Jonathan was president, at the time Jonathan put his life on the line to solve this problem. He was being molested everywhere. That how can you be talking about a conference that will have sovereign power when there's a sovereign government in place? And so, for Olisa Agbakoba to now reference Professor Mwabeze as the one whose views he is adopting for saying that it is the sub-national groups, that's the ethnic nationalities, that should be discussing how to, yes, it was after that altercation, after that challenge to Professor Ben Wabweze, that he recanted from his old position of saying that the government will work out what to become constitution and then call a meeting to ratify it in some way. It's like building a house from the roof. A federation is a union of sovereignties. A federation is a union of constitutions of those sovereignties that are now unionizing, federating, coming together to become one political union. And that was the basis of Nigeria becoming a federation. At the point of independence, it was discussed between 1951 and 1959, concluded in Lancaster House, with all the terms, regions that were like countries of their own, each of them with their constitutions, owning their assets, working those assets, and contributing only 15% of their income for the upkeep of the center that they created. The federal government is a creation, must be a creation of the federating unit. I'm giving us the breakdown of the nature of the problem we have to solve now, for which reason I am embarrassed at the kind of propositions coming from the lawyers who should know, the senior lawyers who should know, the professors and senior advocates who should know. They are telling us the opposite of what should be the solution to the problem as we have it now. And we are not just speculating. We went to work to set the framework, set the process, set the procedures. What comes after what? Like the doctors who do diagnosis and then prescription based on that diagnosis, before treatment that is based on that prescription, in that order. What has gone wrong is that the federation we agreed upon have been truncated, and our sovereignties now hijacked and confiscated by an omnipotent but illicit federal government that is now in charge of all our lives, documented as 68 items in the exclusive list. But the starting point, the entry room, the door to enter the room where the problem is the preamble to that constitution. And I must give credit to Wole Olanipekun, senior advocate. I heard him once, and I'm going to be reaching out to him on this count, because this union will go up in smoke if we do not accept the truth.
We are running into trouble. We are inching there, and time is not in our favor. And I'm not tickled by what the National Assembly is doing. They are not being fair to themselves. They are not being fair to us. They claim to be amending the Constitution. What are they amending? And I want to repeat it. Do you amend something that is not amendable? When you want to amend the Constitution, by the way, Lati, where do you start? You start from the preamble.
We the people?
Oh yes, they have to amend it. Why are they running away from it? If they cannot amend the preamble, if the preamble is not amendable, then it means the Constitution is not amendable. Come on. They have to start from it. Do you start reading your letter from the back page? Do you?
No.
No, they have to start from the preamble. That means the preamble is fake. We the people, who are the we? When did we meet? And why can't we do it? I've studied the constitutions of the world. And I say this also with every sense of humility. There is no constitution that is near as fake, near as deceitful, near as make-believe in nature and in content as the Constitution, as what we call the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended.
If we do not work with that truth about what is wrong with this union that's about to consume 200 million people and create an unprecedented global refugee crisis. What the problem is, anybody who wants to know what the problem is, for which reason I say that Agbakoba is completely wrong in the prescription he's making, should go to that preamble and read slowly. It says, we the people of Nigeria, having solemnly and firmly resolved to live in unity as indissoluble and indivisible. That is, we the Ijaw, we the Ogoni, we the Igbo, we the Yoruba, we the Tiv, we the Fulani, we the Beram, each of which should have been countries of their own, saying that having firmly and solemnly resolved, meaning that we have sat down, considered all things, and come to the conclusion that we could submit our sovereignties into a pool to become one political union. That is the meaning of that claim, that false claim in that preamble. The second false claim is that we do hereby make and give unto ourselves the following constitution. When the story of the constitution and how it was made is contained inside the document, decree number 24 of Absalom Abaka in 1999. He told the story of how he formed a committee called Constitution Debate and Drafting Coordinating Debate Coordinating Committee, whatever, headed by Justice Nikki Toby at the time. And how the committee went round and how they came back to the Supreme Military Council of the time with the report that most people wanted a return to 1979 Constitution. And therefore that the Supreme Military Council or Armed Forces Ruling Council, presided over by the Absalom Abaka, added and subtracted, to and from that report, and passed, signed what they got into law, signed it to be called the 1999 Constitution. So they adopted 1979 wholly, added the states that have been created between 79 and 99, and the local government areas, all kinds of just additions here and there for the institutions that were not there before. That's the only difference. And what is this 1979 Constitution? Because there are people who are going about lying to other people that it came from Constituent Assembly of the people. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that the 1979 Constitution is the victory charter imposed from the outcome of the war of 1967 to 70 by the victorious side. How do I mean? Murtala Muhammad, upon toppling Gowon in July of 1975, immediately commissioned a draft that would be processed into constitution. Rotimi Williams, FRA, was the one that was given that task, to go and make out the instruction materials that would be turned into that draft. FRA Williams looked around for who would join in doing the task. He went to Bankole Oki. Bankole Oki told him not to. He then went to this young university teacher in the University of Lagos at the time, law lecturer called Ben Nwabweze. And it was with Ben Nwabweze that they crafted that draft. That draft was what was placed before the Constituent Assembly that Obasanjo eventually set up, because Murtala Muhammad was killed in 1976. By the time that that draft had been written by Nwabweze at the invitation of Rotimi Williams. And then that draft went to that Constituent Assembly as their main working material. They walked through it, rejected presidential system, rejected the states that were created from 1967 as basis of union, rejected all kinds of things. The land use decree that the land use, what became the Land Use Act, which was the Northern Region land owning system that they wanted to make countrywide. NYSC Act that was imposed in 1973 to send the children of Sokoto and Kano to Port Harcourt and Lagos, while sending the children of Port Harcourt and Lagos to perish in Gashua and Kaura Namoda. That was why they put that 1973 decree of NYSC along with the Land Use Act, the decree into that same country. So it wasn't what the Constituent Assembly came out with that became 1979, because the finished product was submitted, clean copy. Obasanjo on the 21st of September in 1978 introduced 17 amendments, changed all the things that the Constituent Assembly did, and enacted by way of decree the finished product into what they called the 1979 Constitution. That was how it came. And so let nobody come to say that 1979 was better than 99. The same procedure, drafting, making a draft, going back to Supreme Council, that the Supreme Military Council that then makes the final product out by themselves, using a decree to promulgate it. So that preamble that says that we do hereby make and give unto ourselves the following constitution is the second false claim. I'm addressing Olisa Agbakoba and all the lawyers in the land who are talking about as if we just need to go and write another constitution to replace the one we have. It is not the writing of another constitution, and some of the things that people, some of the feedbacks we get from what NINAS is putting out, responses to our propositions. Say, you will see that most people, including lawyers, are thinking that the campaign of NINAS is to for a change of constitution. Let's go and write another constitution. So you have characters who are, lawyers very well known, writing drafts of constitution they want to send to National Assembly. If you go back to that preamble, you will see that there are two clear problems that need to be solved. The first is the question of submitting our sovereignty into the Union of Nigeria. That question was what was taken to Aburi in 1967. That is where Nigeria got stuck. That is where Nigeria lost its way in the forest. Have we agreed to be in the Union from the point of truncation of the original agreement of 1959? That's the question that must be answered now. If that question is not being answered, and you put my signature on a document I know nothing about as the author of my damnation, I'm sorry for you, because that union anchored on that constitution is dead and buried, except we recommit. Except we recommit to being in union. Because if we don't, the default, what will happen is that those who own those sovereignties are going to walk away with their sovereignties. It is called the right to self-determination. And it is not dependent on whether you agree with them or you don't, because it is inalienable. I'm not reporting this from the sidelines. I'm reporting it as one who was directly involved in how the UN came to what it became in terms of definition. Back to that sovereignty, back to that preamble. The question of we, the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, can we pause for a moment and ask ourselves, who are the we? It is when we get that correctly that we then know who is to be discussing. Is it any group of people you meet in Oshodi Market or in Hotel de Jordan in Benin? The we are the owners of the various sovereignties. For instance, the Yoruba, that could be a country of 60 million people, are the ones you are referring to. Yoruba people in Yoruba land, who are now discussing with Ijo people who are in Ijo land, and Igbo people in Igbo land, and Tiv people in Tiv land, and Jukun people in Jukun land. That is the meaning of we the people. It should have been we the peoples of Nigeria. But the mediocrity of Nigeria reduced it to we the people. I'm only leaving it at mediocrity because it could also be the dishonesty. The people who use that we the people instead of we the peoples of Nigeria. Because if it is rewritten in that form, we the peoples of Nigeria, it will then immediately refer to the constituent component nationalities of Nigeria. Who will have to decide? It is their exclusive right to decide. Even as flawed as that constitution is, in section 14(2)(a), it admits, and I'm quoting now, it says, sovereignty belongs to the peoples of Nigeria. Again, they use the word people instead of peoples to tell you the kind of calamity that has befallen this land. That people who hold not just the first degree, many of them hold PhDs and answer all kinds of titles. And then you say you don't know the distinction between the people and the peoples. Sovereignty belongs exclusively to the peoples of Nigeria, who now are unionizing. That's why it's called federation. And so when you accept, you are telling us you have hijacked our sovereignty. Therefore, it's no longer up for discussion. When characters like Ibrahim Bangida will say, these are settled issues, not available for discussion. And then Jonathan calls a meeting to discuss that problem in 2014 on the floor of the conference itself. and we can verify this, the first decision that was taken, I believe that the presidential candidates are listening to this broadcast, to this address, because all of us are standing on one side. All of those who are going to election to renew the life of that constitution are standing on the other side. In the days ahead, it will become practical on the street. The national conference that Jonathan convened in 2014, the first decision they took on the floor of the conference, because Jonathan did not tie their hands like they all claimed after. They were the ones who decided, led by the renegade wing of the Southwest, working with the conservative North, the Caliphate. The same alliance of 1967 turned up on the floor of that conference to dictate that the question of the unity, the question of the union, the question of the sovereignty and how it is unionized will not be discussed. It was the decision of the national conference, it's the delegates to the national conference taken on the floor of the conference. That was what ruined that conference. And that was why we who pressed for it directly with the president of the time, Goodluck Jonathan. That was why we stayed away, because the modalities for how that discussion that will become constitution got muddled up, and then the delegates led by these two groups, the renegade wing of the Southwest and the conservative North, bound together. What became the APC you later saw was that decision to carry on with the Nigeria of master and servant imposed since 1967. And so when Agbakoba goes to say that what should happen is devolution of power, he's saying that our sovereignty now belongs to the federal government, which is supposed to be a union office, our own creation. They've now become our creator because they toppled the 4 regions, fractured it into 36 states, and seized the assets of the regions. That's how the port of Lagos became the property of federal government, the port of Port Harcourt. That's how the oil and gas of the Nigeria Delta became the property of federal government. It was property of Eastern region at the beginning. It was property of Western region at the beginning. That's how everything we saw in that exclusive list, all the solid minerals, that's how the bitumen of Ondo, that's how the limestone of Benue became the property of so-called federal government. So-called because it is illicit. We cannot have a federal government in the absence of a federation. Our federation collapsed in 1966. The attempt to revive it in the meeting that happened in Aburi was truncated by one side, that then went killing people in eastern Nigeria to the tune of 3.5 million, and then built their federation, they built their Nigeria on the blood of those 3.5 million. For what reason? That they say, no, let us go back to what we agreed upon. Okay, we have seen the Nigeria of unitary imposition. What we have now is what it is, what has been created in negation of our sovereignty, in confiscation of our sovereignty, in hijack of our sovereignty by an illicit federal government led by the Fulani and the other members of the Caliphate, with collaborators from all across, regional renegades, anybody from the east, anybody from the west, anybody from the middle belt, who is clinging onto this constitution that they have imposed, this master-servant union that they've imposed by that constitutional imposition, is not on the side of his people in this debate. And so, for the lawyers who are talking about devolution of power, we are saying that it's like building a house from the roof. The power that should be in the hands of the federal government must be a matter of donation, must be donated, must be advanced by the owners, the sovereign constituent components, creating the union. They then say, okay, the union office, that's the federal government, do A, B, C, D for us. For that purpose, we will contribute XYZ percentage of our income. It was 15%, 15 as in 1/5. And it was the region that decided, that managed it, that owned the assets, that created that income. So it is in turning all those things upside down that we have become the unworkable union we have become now, compounded by the Sharia and feudalism that has been imposed in one side. And so there's no such thing as devolution of power. There's no such thing as going to write a constitution that the National Assembly will process. There's no such thing as getting a president to now lead the process of making constitution. What we need to do is to accept that we have a problem that we need to solve, and like South Africa did with their apartheid constitution in 1990, that announcement that President Frederick de Klerk, God bless his soul, he's not been celebrated enough. That kind of announcement he made in 1990 is what Nigeria must make now. If we're not making that announcement to stop the journey to election and solve the union dispute that have been declared since 2020, December 16th, we are only choosing to end the failed Lugarian experiment of 1914 in fiasco. If anybody has any questions, we are prepared to answer those questions. But if anybody is thinking, like Atiku is thinking, that he say he has a draft, a bill already proposed for devolution of power, we tell you categorically that that is hogwash. That is a product of ignorance. If there were lawyers that advised Atiku along that line, those lawyers are illiterate. Ninas will be challenging them to a debate. Let Olisa Agbakoba come. Let Michael Zekome come. Let all of those who are, going around misleading all these political merchants, let them come to a debate, because we say it authoritatively. We say it standing on solid grounds of jurisprudence that our sovereignty does not belong to federal government. Our sovereignty belongs to the constituent components. Yoruba own their sovereignty and they don't owe anybody any apology. It is when they submit that sovereignty that it becomes Nigeria in their part. It is when they just submit their sovereignty that it becomes Nigeria in Ijoland. And if we have raised this question of let us go and resolve that falsehood, self-evident falsehood. We went to court in 2007 to say that we did not agree as claimed. We did not make this constitution as claimed. And Nigeria has been hedging around. And look at what we have now. And people are still canvassing to go to election. Olisa Agbakoba is talking about a candidate that will come so that they will agree with us and commit to doing it. Doing what? Where would they start? The day after the election. The day after they have sworn to defend and uphold that constitution. Then they will come and do what? And if they are hoping to go to the National Assembly, neither the President nor the National Assembly is the custodian of our sovereignty. The vote electing members into National Assembly is not a vote to cede your sovereignty to them for all purposes. Only a body with constituent powers will make what will become constitution. Every other thing is a fraud. Every other thing can be ignored. Every other thing can be challenged. Every other thing will end in fiasco. Instead of wasting our time to go to this election, we are saying, let us go to dealing with that issue of reconstructing the basis, the damaged constitutional basis of Nigeria. That is the business that must be done now. If we're not doing it, and we stubbornly proceed to go to hold the election in the hope that somebody will be declared winner and he will come to govern and have superintendence over the length and breadth of the entirety of Nigeria, I'm sorry for all of those who are nursing that hope. Probably they think that they are going to have enough guns to beat everybody into line. This matter is far beyond what guns can deal with. Let it be heard loud and clear that those lawyers who are pointing here and pointing there in the hope that they will go there, Peter Obi should listen as well. Tinubu should listen as well. The day after the election, there's nothing you are going to do that will cure that constitution. And we already said it in a broadcast. Those who wish to can go to find out on YouTube. Whoever wins 2023 election will discover there's no Nigeria to govern. That's a title on YouTube. Let the presidential candidates, let the parties go and find out why we said so before we carry on with this, exercise in futility of going to election under that constitution. The winner of 2023 election will find that there's no Nigeria to govern on account of what I've just explained. The Nigeria we have now, defined by the 1999 constitution, is a fraud that must be terminated. Whatever it will take to terminate that fraud, those who are suffering from it, those who are being slaughtered all over the place, those who are being impoverished, those whose lives have been rendered unlivable, those who have been made slaves in their homeland, are going to take their sovereignty back on their own terms. But we have put a framework that can bring everybody round a table in some way and solve the problem before it begins to solve itself on the street. Otherwise, it will solve itself on the street. I think we can stop there.